Welcome, everyone. My name is Caroline, and I am on the board of DBSA California. Thank you for joining us today for our third Thursday speaker series. Today, we have the honor of having Tiran Jackson here. Tiran is a dynamic speaker, author, and visionary entrepreneur. He isn't just a survivor, he's a thriver. His own profound journey, marked by personal tragedy, loss, and triumphant resilience, is a testament to the human spirit's indomitable will to overcome. Starting his career as an engineer, Tyran was on the path to success, but life had other plans. Through transformational experiences, he discovered his true purpose, inspiring others to find their own path. Tyran's authenticity and vulnerability now serve as the guiding lights for those seeking resilience, courage, and strength. Thank you so much for being here, Tyran. I'm just gonna turn off the audio here and over to you.
All right. Well, first off, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, everybody, for letting me be a part of this session tonight. I'm going to share with you guys a story that you may not believe, but I'll tell you, it's one of a story you'll never forget. And what has happened to me ever since going through having to face the reality that sometimes life will throw us curveballs, something that we never see coming our way. And it's not the adversity, but how you deal with the adversity that's going to determine how you move forward. So I'm going to give you guys some insight as to how to deal when that pain starts to really take a hold of you in your life. And then what do you do to get from that place where you feel like you're paralyzed and stuck and struggling to survive to actually making the conscious choice to choose to be resilient and learning to thrive. So, with that, let me share my screen here and I want to walk you guys through um, my story that I call Happily Ever Interrupted. And so, I want to take you guys back 7 years ago, 2018. What was going on in 2018 for me? In 2018, I was doing what I thought my purpose in life was. At that time, my purpose was to take care of my family. I was working as an engineering manager for a company, and I thought what I was supposed to do was continue working as an engineer and doing what I needed to do to provide for my wife Malika and my son Cameron. At the same time, Malika, she was moving forward with her life. She had been going through different stages, and in the summer of 2018, she had just gotten an opportunity where she was about to be promoted to director in HR for a Fortune 500 company. Just 2 months prior to then, the person who was in that role actually left their position, and she had been working as an interim director. And right before we were going to celebrate a momentous occasion, they told her that she was going to be able to move into the director role as soon as we got back. Now, where did we get back from? So, what was happening at this same time was Malika and we were getting ready to celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary. And as we were planning for what we were going to do for our wedding anniversary, we started thinking about where we were going to go and how we were going to really bring that moment in the right way. And so, take you back a year before then, my wife Malika, you see her here. She had went on a girls' trip where her and her friends went to Mexico, and one of the things that she did while she was there was actually go swimming with the dolphins. Now, a lot of people love doing this, going to get swim with the dolphins, be able to have those adventures, and she got the picture to prove it. And so this was great for her because when she got back, she was so excited and she told me so much about how she enjoyed it. And as we started to have ideas about what we were going to do moving forward for our 15th anniversary vacation, she told me that she wanted to have another picture like this. Now, what did she mean by that? She didn't mean another picture with a dolphin in the ocean, but she said she wanted to have another picture with another animal in the water. Now, my first thought was, okay, other animals in the water, you must want to do something like go snorkeling with some sharks or swimming with some turtles. But no, what Malika wanted to do was to go to this small exclusive island in the Bahamas called Exuma and go swimming because they had a attraction where you can actually swim with feral pigs. Now, you heard me right. They have pigs that you actually go swimming with, and she wanted to get a picture swimming with the pigs. Now, at the time, I thought, I like bacon, I like ham, I like pork. I don't know if that's going to be the best thing for me to do, but look, if that's what you want to do, baby, that's what we're going to do. So, when we were making our decision, we decided to take this trip where we were going to stay at this all-inclusive resort for 5 days and be able to spend our time reconnecting because right before then we were both very busy. We were both traveling all over the country. When she was gone for work, I was at home with our son Cameron for the week, and then when she would come back, I would travel for a while. So we were really trying to get to a place where we could be at peace with one another, away from all the distractions, away from everything that was going on, and actually um, get to reconnect, but knowing that at one point we were going to be able to go on this excursion and be able to have the opportunity for her to take the picture swimming with the pigs that she wanted to do. So all was well. The day before we actually went on this trip, I drove our son Cameron to stay with his aunt and uncles, 3 hour drive away from Atlanta where we live. And as I got there, I dropped him off and I told him, son, don't worry, we'll be back in 1 week. Now, Cam, he was excited. He knew that me and Malika needed to go and get on this trip and everything. He was happy for us to get away. And he was looking forward to his time being away as well. He was looking forward to being able to eat ice cream late at night and beat up his cousins and play with their dog and all these things kids get to do when they aren't at home with their parents and have to follow their rules. And he also knew he was going to be spoiled by his aunt and uncle for the next week. But I told him, I made a promise to him that once we got back from this trip, that we were going to go and take a vacation, the three of us, and go to the beach and have us a great time. So he was excited with the idea of that after we got back. Now, this is the summer, so he's out of school and everything, perfect time for us to do it. And so I dropped him off feeling like he's going to be good for the next week and that my wife and I are going to have the time of our lives. So the next day, get back to Atlanta. We fly to the Bahamas and we get there, and the first 2 days are amazing. We have time at the beach, we have some fruity drinks, had some time at the pool. We even went ahead and took the pictures. You know, the pictures that everybody takes when they're on vacation and they're with their significant other, having a great time just to be able to enjoy, like I said, that time to reconnect, that time to get away from work and from everything else that's going on in our lives, time to get away from the other people and just have that time to ourselves. And as we were there, we started thinking about, one is amazing to have reached 15 years within our marriage. And then, the plan on what we were going to do for the next 15 years and the 15 years after that. So Malika and I were so excited about what was to come and what we've already accomplished. On the third day, we were excited as well. We woke up that morning because that was the day that we were going to go on this trip. We had found a small tour company who was going to take us on this excursion where we were going to get the opportunity to swim with these pigs. And so we got up that morning so excited. Woke up at 6:30 in the morning, went to do the do the free brunch, the breakfast in the morning. First thing, 6:30, we're leaving from there. 7:30, we find ourselves at the edge of the resort waiting for a bus to pick us up. Now, a bus was supposed to pick us up at 8. And while we were standing there, and they do this all the time, they have buses that come and pick up guests from different resorts on the way to this marina. And while we're there, we're starting to talk with the other people, the other couples who are there. You know how it is when you're on vacation. You know, you're friends with everybody, everybody's happy, you're away from normal, and you're talking about things, where are you from, and all of this, and what brought them there, how long are they been together? And we were having conversations with people because we were all excited about what the day entailed. As we started making our ways from resort to resort and headed toward the marina, we were feeling excited. We were excited with anticipation on how great this day was going to be. Personally, I was excited because my wife was going to get to do the most important thing that she wanted to do while on this vacation, which was to go swimming with these pigs. And for me, I'm thinking to myself, I'm doing what we need to do to make sure that the woman that I love most is going to enjoy and have the memories to be able to share and look back on for this trip. So we make our way to the marina, and as we get off the bus and make our way up, we realize that there were several options there. Now, they had two options. You could either do an 8 hour full day excursion where there were going to be multiple stops where they were going to actually do different activities, but it included to go swimming with the pigs. Or you had the option to do a 4 hour half day excursion where it wouldn't be as many stops, but you would get to get some lunch and you would get to go swimming with the pigs. So either way, we were going to be able to spend the time together, but also she was going to get that photo op with the pigs that she wanted in the water. So while Malika and I were there, we were thinking about it and talking and discussing and whether to do the 4 hour trip or the 8 hour trip. And after thinking about it, I said, Malika, let's do the half day trip because personally, I wanted to go back to the resort and go golfing that afternoon. I thought 4 hours was gonna be enough time for us to be out there on the water, that we would be able to spend the time with the pigs, we still be able to get to see the rest of the sights and have a full experience while we were there. And Malika thought about it and she told me, okay, Ty, that would be great. I'm good with that. That she would go back to the spa that afternoon. So we started making our plans for what we were going to do when we were going to get back to the resort. But at the same time, we knew we were going to make the most out of this moment. So at 9 o'clock, we find ourselves boarding the boat and getting ready to take off. We board a small boat. There were 10 passengers on the boat, and we took our seats on the right side of the boat, not thinking anything of it at the time. The boat takes off from the dock. As it takes off, I got my right arm around Malika, and I'm thinking to myself, this is great. The weather is perfect. It's a wonderful 78 degrees out there. You could smell the aroma from the sea. And as we was taking off, I could see some iguanas in the trees. And I'm thinking to myself, we're in paradise and I'm with the woman that I love, having the time of my life. And this is going to be the most momentous, celebratory, memorable time of our trip this time. And that was true. However, I didn't know it at the time why it would be that way. As we took off, we got 5 minutes of the ride, and my life changed forever. I want to share this with you, and you'll see a little bit more about what happened.
Nearly 2 decades ago, while in college at Tennessee State University, she was an AKA with a megawatt smile, a beautiful heart, and a magnetic personality. He, a Kappa, a humble guy with a sweet soul who prided himself on his study habits. They fell in love immediately after meeting at a party. They married 2 years later and had a son, Cameron. Their friends and family described their marriage as the perfect union between two strong, smart, and God-fearing people. Tiran and Malika Jackson were undeniably the envy of most couples.
Tonight, authorities in the Bahamas investigating what caused this popular tour boat to explode, killing one American woman and injuring at least 9 others, leaving behind this incinerated floating shell.
But on June, Malika died while the two were celebrating their 15th wedding anniversary while vacationing in the Bahamas. She was 39. These are pictures of the duo taken the day before tragedy struck. They were enjoying a romantic getaway when the engine of the tour boat they were on suddenly exploded off the coast of Exuma. 10 American tourists were on board the 40-foot chartered boat at the time of the incident. Tiran lost his leg, broke his collarbone, and fractured his pelvis and spine, suffered second-degree burns, and had his left shoulder dislocated. Malika, who was sitting where the engine exploded, was killed. And now Tiran, whose doctors say is a walking miracle, is forced to be a single father. And while his wife is gone, these pictures, memories, their son, are all reminders of the love that was and will forever live inside of his soul.
At 9:05, I woke up. I woke up because I was on fire. I woke up because my right leg was literally burning from the flames as a result of that explosion. As I started to come to, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had a broken right foot, third-degree burns on my right leg, a fractured pelvis, fractured vertebrae, bruised ribs, a broken collarbone. And as I glanced down, I could see my left foot. My left foot was severed. I could see my ankle bone, blood rushing out. And I'm thinking to myself, what happened? Unbeknownst to us, there was a fuel leak that was emanating from the fuel tank. And that fuel tank was right below where Malika and I were sitting. Something created a spark. The next thing you know, I found myself waking up face down on the surface of that burning boat. As I was starting to come to, I could see passengers from that second boat. They were yelling to me, "Get off the boat, get off the boat." I tried to push myself up, but I crumbled. I tried to push myself up again, but as I said, my collarbone was broken in 4 places. I didn't realize that. The only thing that I could do was reach my right hand out, put my fingertips in the ridges on the surface of that boat, and just drag myself 2 feet, drag myself another 2 feet until I pass out again. Now, by the grace of God, there were people who saw that from that second boat and they risked their lives. They swam over. We were still in shallow water. We weren't too far from where we took off. They were still close enough on that boat to be able to get to me and pull me off the boat. And I'm grateful that they did because 3 minutes after they got me off that boat, the second fuel tank exploded. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, what about Malika? What about your wife? Well, Malika was thrown in a different direction. She was thrown to the right off of the boat. Her and one other passenger were in the middle of the ocean. And I forgot to mention, even though Malika wanted to swim with the dolphins and swim with the pigs, Malika couldn't swim. And so she was struggling, and I couldn't do anything about it. Now, there happened to be a third boat that was around close enough when everything happened, and they were able to get Malika and this one other passenger on the boat and start to get them to shore. But as they got me to the boat that took off at the same time we did, I started asking questions. How is my wife? Is she okay? It seemed like it took forever, but they finally turned the boat around and got me to shore. But as they got me to shore, I was separated from Malika. An ambulance came and picked her and the other passenger up and started taking them to a clinic. As far as me, here I am laying with the severed foot, broken, without knowing how badly I'm broken. But all I can think about is I hope that my wife is okay. After what was about 30 minutes, finally somebody was there to be able to take me to get some help. A civilian who just happened to have a pickup truck saw the smoke and the flames, and he came over and they put me on a piece of plywood on the back of this pickup truck and drive me in the bumpy back roads of the Bahamas to finally get me to the same clinic where my wife was. Now, as I'm on the back of this truck, I'm trying to figure out what happened because we didn't see this coming. I don't know what happened. All I know is I'm hurt, I'm broken, and I'm praying to myself that my wife is okay. One of the other passengers happened to be someone who we were talking to on the bus ride over, a gentleman by the name of Chris Clark. Chris happened to be a NFL football player. He was an offensive lineman for the Carolina Panthers. I bring this up because we started to form a connection on the way over there. And sometimes you don't know when people are going to be put in your lives for whatever reason to be able to help you out. Chris happened to be someone, he didn't have a phone with him, didn't have anything, but he was used to remembering intricate details and play calls and things that he was going to do to be able to block and at the time protect Cam Newton while he was in the NFL. He was used to remembering this information. So while we're on the back of this truck and he's talking to me, he's telling me that Be positive. Everything is going to be all right. I told him what I could remember and think of at the time that would at least give an opportunity for help. I gave him my mom's phone number, which I remember by heart. I gave him my sister's phone number, which I remember by heart. I told him the room that I was staying in at the resort that we were at. I told him to say the passcode to the safe where my passports were, hoping that we wouldn't need all of that, but by all means, do everything that you can in order to help me and get in touch with the people who could help me get through this situation. Chris was able to retain all that information, and I'm grateful that he did because as we got to the clinic, he started jumping into action. Now, as we finally got to the clinic and they finally get me out and they put me on a stretcher, they're wheeling me in. And as they wheel me into this clinic, that's the first time I'd hear Malika. I'd hear Malika, her moans, her agony, her screaming, her yelling, and I couldn't do anything about it. They had her in this first bay. They had this second passenger in this another in the bay right next to her, and they wheeled me in on the bay on at the end. Now at this clinic, there was only one doctor. And so as they're wheeling me in, I'm trying to make myself as still and as quiet as possible. One of the assistants, he actually tries to wrap what's left of my foot to my leg. And as I'm there, I'm just hoping, even though I'm in pain, I'm hoping that Malika's okay. I can hear those moans, but I wanted to hear her say words. I could hear those moans become fainter. I'm hoping that she's okay. I hear the moans stop, and I'm thinking to myself, God, I pray that my wife is all right, that she is getting through this. Maybe they had to sedate her. I'm running all these scenarios in my mind. And at the same time, I'm broken and hurt as well. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the doctor, he actually comes over to me. And I ask him, how is Malika? How is my wife? Well, the doctor tells me that we can't treat you here and that we've got to send you and this other passenger to the good hospital. We have to start preparing you to put you on an ambulance, to take you to an air ambulance, to fly you from Exuma to Nassau, where there's somebody who can help you out. But that wasn't my question. I asked him, how is my wife? How is she doing? He told me that my wife would come to that hospital later. And so, even though I didn't hear Malika, I'm getting, I'm starting to believe that there's some hope. Because if they're not sending her to the good hospital right away, surely her injuries must not be as bad. And so, in a matter of minutes, I found myself getting transported out of this clinic and put on an ambulance. And as I'm on the ambulance, I'm trying to talk to the EMTs and try to understand, is my wife going to be okay? Silence. They tell me nothing. All they say is, we've got to get you to better treatment. Finally, they get me to the airplane to fly me to Nassau. And as they do that, they're trying to make sure that all of my cuts and my bruises and everything that I'm bleeding, everywhere I'm bleeding from, is at least stopped because they knew they couldn't do anything else with me. Finally, they get me to Nassau. They get me off the airplane. They get me to the hospital. I go into the emergency room, and that's where they start to tell me that we've got to put you through emergency surgery. You're bleeding from your left foot. We can't do anything to stop it unless we see everything else that's wrong. So the next thing I know, I go through a CAT scan. They bring me back out. They say, we have to do what we can to try to pin your foot back to your leg. I go to surgery. I wake up. It's 6 hours after the incident occurred. And the only thing I can think of as I wake up in ICU is that Malika should be here by now. My wife should be here. As I start to come to, the nurse in the room, she sees me starting to move, and she actually leaves the room to go get the doctors. After about 5 minutes, two doctors come in the room. And as soon as they come in the room, I ask them the most important question I could be asking them at that moment. Where is Malika? Is she here yet? The two doctors, they look at each other in confusion and they say, Mr. Jackson, give us a moment. We'll be right back. Now, I'm thinking when they walk out the room that they're going to find out what room that she's in or something to give me an update because she should have been here by now. So I'm hoping and I'm feeling pretty good because I'm thinking that I'll get to at least hear my wife's voice. I'll get to see her. They told me that she was going to come later, so she must not have been hurt as bad as I was earlier. After about 5 minutes, the doctors come back in, and one of them steps up and says, Mr. Jackson, we hate to inform you, but your wife didn't make it. My wife didn't make it. I'm thinking to myself, she just hasn't made it here yet. There must have been some problem with the airplane. It must need to be refueled, or they must have had some issue. They must not have had a second airplane, so it must just hasn't made it here yet. No, Mr. Jackson, your wife died at that clinic. They didn't want to tell you that before they sent you here. So imagine the situation. Here I am celebrating my 15th wedding anniversary with the woman that I love, with the woman who I plan to be with for the rest of my life. And what was supposed to be one of the happiest celebratory times has now turned tragic. And I have to come to the grips with the fact that my wife is no longer here. To get that news broke me, and I was in disbelief. I was thinking to myself, this has to be a nightmare. I cried myself to sleep. I couldn't believe it. Now I'm broken. I'm hurt physically, but emotionally, I can't process the fact that my wife is gone. I go to sleep thinking that this has to be a nightmare and I'm going to wake up the next morning and all of this is going to be a dream. I wake up that next morning only to have to start accepting my reality. I wake up that next morning with my left foot wrapped up and bandaged from the surgery. I wake up that next morning not being able to move because my back is still hurt and broken. I got vertebrae that are chipped and fractured. I wake up that next morning in pain, not because I had bruised ribs, because I lost my rib. And as I'm trying to understand and process the reality of the fact that my wife is gone, I realize I have to do something that I didn't want to do, but I knew I had to do. That 12-year-old boy that I dropped off with his aunt and uncle, I was going to have to call him and tell him what happened. They give me a phone, and I'm able to reach out to my brother-in-law to speak to Cam. And I have to tell him this news that, son, I know you know mom and dad were going to go and have a great time on vacation, but something tragic has happened. Now, mom and dad were in an accident, and mom's never coming home again. Dad, no, quit playing. And to have to hear him yell and scream on the other side of that line in disbelief hurt me to the core. But I had to tell him, son, I'm not playing. This is no joke. We don't know what happened, but mom passed away. In the midst of this, I'm in tears, and I can hear Cam in tears on the other end of that line. I was praying, you shouldn't have to do this. You shouldn't have to have news broken to you that the only woman that you've been close to all your life is no longer here. that he's never going to get to have the opportunity to talk to his mom again. And I'm hurt because I'm having to process the fact that not only am I going to be broken, but now my son is going to be broken too. We talk and I tell him that because he asked me if I'm going to be okay. And I'm having to lie to my son because I don't know how bad I'm injured. I don't know how likely I am to be able to recover. But I tell him that I'm going to be all right and that we're going to figure this out. I tell him I call him later on that day. And as I get off the phone, my heart drops to my feet. I've lost my best friend, the mother of my child, my lover, the person who I was building an empire with, all in an instant. And now I've broken my son's heart and don't know how he's going to recover from that. As I'm laying there, still trying to piece together what happened and understand what's going on, things start to get worse for me. Well, when they put me in surgery, that, like as I said, they tried to reattach what was left of my left foot to my leg. Didn't know it at the time, but my foot had gotten infected as I was being transported from one boat to the other. That infection started to go through my body. And as I'm laying there over the matter of about 3 hours, I was starting to feel worse and worse. The pain was increasing and things were getting to where it was beyond uncomfortable. I could see the EKG monitor over my head as I laid in that bed. And over the course of this 3 hours, I saw my vital signs go from green to yellow to red. My heartbeat was racing, 190 beats per minute while I'm just laying in the bed. My temperature had shot up to 104 degrees. I'm suffering because I'm coming to the reality that I've already broken my son's heart because his mom is no longer here. But I'm coming to the reality that the next time I close my eyes is going to be the last time I close my eyes. That I'm on the verge of death too. And to make matters worse, they stopped bringing the doctors in to treat me, and they started just bringing priests in to pray over me. They stopped treating the infection. They just started giving me tramadol so I would die a less painful death. So imagine yourself in this situation. You're broken physically, you're broken emotionally, your will is taken away, you're broken mentally, and now all of your hope is starting to be taken away from you. Spiritually, I'm being broken. And I'm starting to come to grips with the fact that I must be meant to join Malika now, that it wasn't meant for me to still be here. I started processing some of the things that we could have done wrong to deserve this in our life and truly start to face what seemed to be my reality, that I was not going to survive another day. As I'm starting to go in and out of consciousness again, I go to sleep not expecting to wake up again. Now, right before I started to go to sleep, there was a beacon of hope that showed up. My sister and my mom, who Chris Clark, who had called them earlier the day before, they had found out about what happened before it made national news and they announced what occurred. And they did everything they could to go from Nashville, Tennessee to Fort Lauderdale, Florida to get to the Bahamas and actually lay their eyes on me to see that if I was still alive or not. Chris had communicated to them that I was horribly injured and that Malika, that she didn't survive. And so as they got there, they started saying that they're going to do any and everything that they could to make sure that I had a chance. And so as I fell asleep that evening, I had a little bit of optimism, but I didn't expect to wake up to see another day. Now, at that point, My sister started working and trying to see what they could do to get me out of there because it was very clear and very evident that there was not going to be the means of being able to treat me in that hospital. A lot of things were working in the background, and I did wake up to see that next morning. And shortly after I woke up, I found myself basically being confiscated from that hospital bed, put on a stretcher, and being wheeled out the hospital. As they wheeled me out the hospital, it was being told to me that there was a level 1 trauma center in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, that saw what happened. And they had heard about my condition and they wanted to give me a chance to live. And so they had chartered a plane to come and pick me up and try to get me to that hospital so they could at least see if they could keep me from passing as well. I get there all of a sudden. During this time, it was becoming difficult because they still wanted to retain me in the hospital. But before we knew it, I found myself and my sister and my mom on this plane to Florida. They get me to the hospital. And as they get me there, the doctors and the lead surgeon tells my family we have to do whatever we can to try to save his life. And the next thing I know, as soon as I get there, I'm getting prepared to go through emergency surgery again. They put me in surgery, and I wake up and I find my left leg missing below the knee. They had to stop the infection from continuing to spread through my body because my organs had already started shutting down the day before. Over the course of the next several days, I go through 9 different surgeries in the midst of trying to put the pieces of me back together. One day I go through 5 surgeries, and in the midst of it, I was still unstable. But the next day, this is 5 days after the incident, things started to make sense. A little bit, at least in a couple of ways. Now, I'm a spiritual person, and I've been praying this whole time for God to give me a reason as to why this had to happen to us and what now. And there was a message that came clear to me. A couple of things that were shared. Number one, it was the fact that I was going to have to accept the fact that it was Malika's time to come home. And the sooner I accepted that, the better off I was going to be. That my happily ever after, or what I wanted to be, actually was going to be happily ever interrupted. The other thing that I had to come to grips with was the fact that if you wanted to, it could have taken my life 3 different times, but I was being saved and spared for a reason. I could have had my life taken when that boat exploded. I could have had my life taken when I went through after the initial surgery and my vital signs that went from green to yellow to red. I could have been taken after I went through the 5 surgeries the day before and was still very unstable. But he's keeping me here for a reason. And that the reason was going to become apparent later on down the road. Told me that I wasn't going to go back to the life that I had, that the normal that I was used to was not going to be the normal I was going to have moving forward. That I was not going to be an engineer, that there was going to be a different path created for me. And it was going to be up to me if I chose to want to go down that path in order to live a different life as seen fit. But there was one other message, this message to be resilient. Be resilient. What does it mean to be resilient? I didn't know what it meant at that time, but that message just kept resonating. But it came clear one other option, one other thought, that I had a choice to make. That I could choose to feel sorry for myself and I could struggle to survive, or I could make the conscious decision. I could choose to be resilient and learn to thrive. And in the middle of all that, as I'm trying to understand what is this going to look like to be resilient, he told me that the life that I've lived up to this point and the obstacles that I've overcome were nothing compared to the obstacles and challenges I was going to have to face moving forward. And it was important for me to understand that I had to be resilient if I was going to overcome. And it was also at that moment that it became clear, even though I didn't know it at the time, what it truly meant to be resilient. That resilience is not about regaining what was lost, but reshaping what still remains. And it's what we do with what still remains that's going to control the narrative of our lives moving forward. Let me say that again. Resilience is not about regaining what was lost. What has happened to us has happened. We can't always go back. We can't go back and change the past. But what are you going to do with what still remains? What are you going to do with the situation and circumstances to reshape what your future looks like? That is the most critical element of being able to deal with the adversity, deal with the pain, deal with the obstacles, deal with the challenges, and not let that define us and keep us stuck and paralyzed, but be able to create a pathway for us to learn to prosper. If I chose to be resilient, if I chose to be able to make the conscious decision to not let the breakdowns and the obstacles hold me back, but also use these situations to create positive growth, let it serve as a catalyst to become a better version of myself, then I have a chance of hopefully thriving and not being stuck and surviving. And so, even though I was broken in that bed, even though I didn't know what my future looked like, that was the moment that things started to shift as far as my mentality. I knew if I wanted to have a chance at being able to bounce back in life, despite losing my wife, despite losing the person who had been supporting me, the person who was my best friend, the person who I depended on most, that it required me to make a conscious decision to choose to be resilient. And so with that was the start of what was going to be who Tiran Jackson 2.0 was going to be. As I look back at things, and I have a platform that's called Reborn Resilient because I was reborn on the day in which that incident occurred. And if it wasn't for resiliency, I wouldn't be here. And so I keep that in mind as, we go through these situations where we go through transformations in life. We deal with a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of obstacles. And look, I'm not immune to that as well. As I go through some of this, I'm going to share with you guys just how serious it was for me to fight off the pain, the hurt. I had suffer from depression, suffer from anxiety, suffer from survivor's remorse, suffer from the guilt of knowing that I made the decision that got us on that boat, the severe grief of having a soul who was so special to me, having her life taken away. And these were going to be the demons I was going to have to fight if I was going to overcome and be able to bounce back and be able to thrive in the situations that I was going to have moving forward. And so that resilience has definitely been a part of how I recover, how I was able to get life back on track, but it didn't happen overnight. Didn't happen easy. Just to take you guys even further into this story, after about 2 weeks at the hospital, they finally said it was time for me to go. They told me that we've done all we could do for you here. Now, at that point in time, I'm still having a hard time. My left shoulder is in a sling. My right foot is in a cast because it's broken. I've got a back brace on, and I'm missing half of my left leg. And what the thought or what the plan was initially was, okay, you need to go and find a rehab facility that will allow for you to heal. And so keep in mind, we're in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia. Most of my family was either in Nashville, Tennessee, or near Birmingham, Alabama. And so as we started talking about what the options look like, there were a couple of suggestions that came to mind. The first one was to go to Nashville. They have a amazing rehab facility at Vanderbilt University. And the thought was, okay, at least this way I'll be somewhat close to family, but I would be in a dedicated facility to start my physical recovery as I was trying to get back to a place where hopefully I would be able to get to a place where I'm on crutches and could move one day and not necessarily be in a wheelchair. And so the doctors put together all the paperwork. They put together all of my charts, all of my records, provided it to Vanderbilt. They waited a day, And then Vanderbilt came back and they denied me. They said, we're not going to take him into our rehab program. And I'm thinking to myself, I've just gone through one of the most traumatic experiences one could ever imagine. Why would they deny me? The doctor said, don't worry about it. We got other options. And this is where the rest of my family, and I'm like, okay, well, there's this university in Alabama, University of Alabama, Birmingham. They've got a world-class medical facility as well. They get all the paperwork, all the charts, all the information to them as well, send it to them. Another day goes by, come back, I'm rejected again. They wouldn't accept me. And I started asking the doctors, we were trying to understand why wouldn't these places take me? Well, these rehab facilities said I had to have two functional limbs for them to be able to do anything with me. And as I said, my shoulder I can't move my shoulder. I'm missing my left leg and my right foot. I can't put any weight on it. They said that they didn't want any parts of me. So now any chance of physical recovery, I feel like is flushed down the toilet because nobody who can treat me is willing to accept me. And so after a lot of discussion within my family and with the doctors, the suggestion was made that I needed to go and live with family and just rest and start to go through this place of what would allow for me to go. And I'm going to go into what I call my roadmap to resilience, but this is the first part of it where I actually had to go through this place for restoration, that I was actually going to live with my sister and be in a place where I could be taken care of by people who love me, by people who were going to care for me and actually do things for me to help me out. Now, so what that entailed was I was flown from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to Nashville, Tennessee, and basically placed into the guest room in my sister's house by the EMTs in order to start this next phase of my journey. The goal was for me to hopefully go through the next 6 to 8 weeks. And the intention was to hopefully rebuild strength in my foot where I could actually put weight on it in my right foot, to be able to recover from my shoulder to a place where I could move with crutches. And in the midst of all of this, it was very difficult because this time was giving me time to have a forced pause in my life to have to start to reflect on so many things. At this point, it was an opportunity for me to actually begin to realize the fact that Malika was no longer here. During that time, I found myself having some of the worst cases of PTSD of waking up on that boat, of having severe sadness due to the fact that I realized that the woman I thought was going to be in my life was no longer here. I found myself crying at night and waking up because I couldn't believe that this was my reality. I found myself thinking about what if I never walk again? How will I ever be able to walk with my son and be able to be with him? All of these thoughts and all of this pain started to sink in on me. And I was starting to reach a certain level of sadness beyond anything I ever imagined in my life. I was someone who, up until that point, didn't consider myself having a reason or needing to go to therapy. I thought I had life pretty much under control and balance, but now I'm dealing with pain that I never thought I would have, that I had never experienced before. I found myself not wanting to do anything because all I could do was lay in that bed. My day consisted of being rolled out of the bed and pushed in a wheelchair to move from the bedroom to the living room just to sit in a recliner all day and then come back to the bed. And it was during this time that I was really starting to have to figure out ways to deal with my depression. One of the most important things that could have happened was for me to, for my sister to buy me a journal. And that journal was important because the one limb that wasn't damaged for whatever reason was my right arm. I'm right-handed. And so in these moments where I felt sadness come in and I'm thinking about the times that me and Malika had together, I found myself pulling out the journal and writing down my feelings and my thoughts. As someone who was so used to being reserved and being the rock for everybody else, family, friends, others, the source of stability, I found myself being the most broken and the most in need of support. Being at my sister's house allowed her to talk to me and for us to actually have conversations about the great times that Malika and I had, about figuring out what steps I was going to have to take in life to make sure that Cam was going to be all right, and figuring out what I was going to need to do in order to try to get my hands around everything that's happened and deal with the hurt and the pain of losing the person who I care for most. All of this, even though I was still in a ton of physical pain, was really the first steps in the restoration of who Tiran Jackson was becoming. Before I knew it, I found myself writing messages and letters to Malika about the great times that we had as a means for me to process some of the pain and grief that I had and and starting to get a little bit closer to accepting the fact that she was not going to be here. Sure, I had anxiety. I was worried about what the future looked like. The doctors had told me after I got out of the hospital that it was probably going to be 8 to 10 months before I'd be able to be fitted with the prosthetic. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I guess I better learn how to use these crutches really well because I don't know if I'll ever be able to walk. And even if I did, they said it would look awkward and wouldn't be like a normal person. But as I'm having all these thoughts racing through my mind, I realized that I had to have that pause around people who cared for me to start the process of healing. Sometimes rest is necessary for the healing to take place. And when we find ourselves in our most broken state, instead of keep trying to keep going, we might need to take that moment to take a break and start the process of healing by just being at peace and assessing what's happened. So, as part of this journey, I had to find myself doing things that brought some restoration to me, that brought some peace to me. This was a little bit later. This was a moment where, as sad as it sounds, when I was finally able to get back around my son, us just sitting on the back patio, doing homework when he was back in school, was one of those things that just brought peace because it did bring a sense of what the future would look like, but be able to be around those who love me and help me with the depression, with the pain. And so for the first 8 weeks after getting out of the hospital, I was just spent trying to get to a place where my emotions were as manageable as possible without actually having real help. But like I said, being able to journal, being able to get the thoughts that were going through my head and putting them on paper started to make it real for me and allowed me to at least begin to accept a little bit of what that reality was going to look like. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with so much that's going on so fast and you don't know where to start, you might need to take that moment to pause and and really process what's happened and allow for some level of restoration to start putting the pieces of yourself back together. So in this roadmap, that restoration was so critical and so important. Had I been at one of those rehab facilities, I wouldn't have been around people that were going to give me love, and I needed that. And I needed the people who I was already connected to talk with in order to have that be part of my process. So keep in mind, the restoration is the first step that you have to have in order to start to recover when things go down or break down in your life. Like I said, rest is not a weakness, and don't look at it as such. It's the foundation for our healing to begin. And so don't be afraid to take a moment to take a step out of what may be causing stress, pain, hurt, burnout in your life and get yourself back together. Next thing I want to share with you guys is uh, what is the next important piece in this roadmap. I had to develop an obsession. And when I say an obsession, that is a laser-like focus on what is most important in our life. Basically, identifying where the priority lies and being able to block out the distractions, not let anything stop you from that. The reason why this is important is because while I was at my sister's house over the course of this 6 to 8 weeks, one of the things that happened was that I was allowed to have physical therapists actually come to the house and work out with me. And what they were doing were trying to do what was necessary for me to hopefully get to a place where I could one day walk again. Now, I know it sounds minor, but there was a time, and I've got this water bottle here. It simulates a 2 pound weight. And what was important about it was they gave me that 2 pound weight, and I had to rotate it in and out, in and out, in and out in my shoulder that was broken. As painful as this was, even though it might not seem like as much, this hurt like hell, and I hated it as I was going through it because I was afraid of the pain of what it was like to have to feel that. When I went through surgery months before, as I was after the incident, they had to put a titanium plate and 6 screws in my shoulder, and I could feel it every time I moved my shoulder. So when I was going through this, even though I knew I was going to hurt, I had to treat it like it was the most important thing that was happening in my life at that moment. I had to make it a priority to keep doing what was necessary if I wanted to get to the next step, the next stage in my life. The obsession is critical when you have a greater goal and you set that goal and you want to achieve it. My goal at that point in time was just to physically get back to a place where I could hopefully one day be on crutches and be able to move and not be dependent on being pushed in a wheelchair. Every day, I was doing the exercises that was necessary for me to start this process of physical recovery, of healing, with hoping that it would expedite and accelerate the process for me to hopefully get back to a place where I could move. I treated that obsession as if it was the most important thing in my life. And sometimes you have to block other things out that are going to keep you from getting to where you need to get to. Find your obsession. Find what that most important thing is. This was me having to go through stretching my my good leg just to be able to create some flexibility because my muscles, my tendons had gotten so tight that they said it was going to be so painful when I started walking again. This obsession led me to being able to get to a place where after about 6 weeks, I could finally get to where my shoulder was strong enough, my foot was strong enough in the cast to where I could take those first steps on crutches. And you don't know how important it is when you're so used to being able to get up and move on your own to getting to a place where you have to depend on everybody to even push you to the bathroom. To be able to take those steps was a breakthrough. That was a milestone. And that was something that was so important to me because now I had a little bit of independence. I saw that the work that I had put in and the obsession that I had to regain the strength was starting to pay off. So when you find yourself where you don't know what you have to do, you have to identify what it is you're obsessed with and will be obsessed with to get closer and closer to your goals. That obsession eventually led to me finally getting to a place where I had a prosthetic. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the doctor said if I was lucky, it was going to be 8 to 10 months before I might be able to walk. I found myself after staying focused on what I needed to do with that physical therapy 3.5 months after taking my first steps with this prosthetic and realizing that there was some hope. There was something for me to be optimistic about that I would one day be able to move again. Even though it didn't look clean, even though it didn't look perfect, it was progress. And when you find yourself with the obsession to do what you need to do to reach your goals, you will find yourself reaching the progress that you need to get there. So, obsession is a key part of what it takes to be able to find their resilience and overcome. What goals do you happen to have in your life based on what's changed, and are you obsessed to achieve them? A lot of time we operate aimlessly. just moving from day to day, place to place, objective to objective. But are we intentional about what we're obsessed with in order to get closer to get to those goals? So ask yourself, if nothing drives you, if nothing creates that strong ambition for you, and you find yourself wondering why you're not achieving what you want to in life, find that obsession, find that objective, find that laser-like focus, and do what you must to achieve where you want to get to in your goal in life. I'll move a little bit faster through this. The next step in my roadmap to resilience is acceptance. What does it mean to get to a place of acceptance? Anybody who has gone through the loss of a close loved one, you know that grief can be a roller coaster, that there's a lot of different things that are going through your mind. Why did this have to happen? What had to occur? Why can't she still be here? The pain, the hurt, the depression, the feelings of that person no longer being here, being an issue. We find ourselves sometimes in denial of our reality. And what I have to point out that I learned through all of this, that denial is the enemy of acceptance. Sometimes we find ourselves holding on to our past and it's preventing us from being able to move forward with our future. Now, in no way does this mean letting go of the memories of the greatness of the times that Malika and I had together. Those would always be there. But sometimes we have to accept the fact that our reality is different than what it once was. One thing about acceptance, I talk about this because our son Cameron, as I mentioned earlier, he was used to at times being with me and mom being gone on a work trip, and then times where it was him and her and me being gone. Well, in his mind, he processed that as if mom was just gone on a long work trip and hasn't come back yet. He was trying to compartmentalize what happened and not accept the reality that we were going to have to figure out how to do life ourselves. Now, as soon as I got to a place where I was able to move physically, I was able to come back to Atlanta where Cam and I lived, and we tried to get back to life as close to what our new normal is going to be as possible. At this point in time, his school year has started. He played football. He got back into playing football, which brought some familiarity and some continuity in his life. And we tried to establish routines that would at least get us looking ahead to what our new normal looked like. But it was also at that point in time where we started really addressing our mental health, that we started doing the grief counseling and doing the therapy and getting expert advice on how we needed to deal with our emotions as to what was going on. But at first, it was harder for him. He had a hard time accepting the reality. For me, I was having to accept the fact that this is who I was, that when I looked in the mirror, I was not going to look like everybody else, that physically I'm going to have something that's going to be different, that's going to be a part of who I am moving forward. I could either feel sorry for those things and be in denial of it, or learn how to accept that as my new reality. And even though it hurt, even though it's hard, sometimes if we want to be able to move forward in life, we've got to accept the bad things that we see. There's a symbolic reason why in this picture I'm looking at the mirror. This is the mirror manifestation that has you, when you actually look at your reality, you look at yourself, you have a better chance of seeing what I'm really dealing with instead of living in this um, desired fantasy of what my life could be. I had to understand that instead of having Malika as my wife on earth, that she was going to be my angel in heaven and looking down on me and Cam as we have to move forward through life, that Cam was going to have to adjust to it being a closer bond between he and I. For me, I had to understand that I had to be a motherly figure as well as a fatherly figure in the midst of coming forward. But as we started to go through the counseling, as we started to go through the process of being restored and getting our emotions under control, it did lead to a certain level of healing and a certain level of growth to one another. And that acceptance of we need help, that we can't do this ourselves, was one of the most important and valuable steps we could have made, decisions that we could have made in order to be able to regain control of our lives moving forward. So, my question to you is there something in your life that has happened that you just don't want to accept? Are you in denial of that thing? Are you holding on to it and it's preventing you from moving forward? The sooner that we get to acceptance, the sooner that we can move forward powerfully. Next in this roadmap to resist, I want to talk about the D. The D is for the decisions that we have in life. We're going to be faced with decisions every day. You being on this meeting this evening was a decision, and hopefully this decision will give you inspiration to go out and do things beyond what you imagine. Sometimes we have to make decisions that may not seem right at that time, but overall might create something great in our lives. Of course, I always at the initially I hark back to the decision that I made that put us on the boat that day. And I had to live with that. And I had to understand that this was going to be something that if I didn't come to a place of accepting that it has happened, that I was going to struggle the rest of my life moving forward. But there are other decisions that we make that can actually enhance and improve our life. It was probably about 3 months after the incident. And one of the things that my therapist, she and I talked about was the fact that it was approaching what would have been Malika's birthday, it would have been her 40th birthday, and how to deal with that situation. And I knew that I was going to be emotionally in a broken place that was going to hurt me thinking about the fact that her birthday was here and we weren't going to be able to celebrate it. But there was an opportunity, and a friend of ours had suggested, how about we throw a party celebrating Malika's life? And even though I wasn't ready and prepared to have to deal with the emotions of others when dealing with my grief, we weighed those options and it finally I said, okay, well, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe this will be something that will help me move forward through my healing process by being around people who loved her, who cared for her, and who wanted to celebrate her memory. And so in the midst of it, we did this and I got to be around people who, as I said, they cared for her, but what it did was it that decision actually allowed me to get energy from other people that actually helped me heal faster. And as emotionally broken as I was, the fact that we were celebrating the life of Malika on that special day was something that I feel as though it allowed me to be able to socially be active and be around people who were going to help me even more so in my recovery. People who I could trust, people who I had friendships with, and who actually were willing to work with me and listen to me when I was at my lowest. So that was a decision that even though I was cautious about it at first because I didn't know how I was going to go, actually helped accelerate my healing process. So, but sometimes we find ourselves where we don't want to make decisions and that can hold us back in life. I'll ask you this: what decisions are you avoiding that might be limiting you from healing? Sometimes we have to take a look and assess what we actually need to act on in order to move forward. Next, I talk about the motivation. Motivation, what's going to get you out of bed and what's going to keep you going, what's going to keep you moving in life. There were times where I didn't want to get out of bed and do that physical therapy or go to counseling or go to do anything in order to address my pain. But I had to start thinking back as to what was going to keep me going. And I take you guys back. It was a year before Malika and I went on this trip. We were in our basement. We were watching a movie, and we was watching this movie. And early on in the movie, the main character, who the movie was based upon, the premise, they were actually killed early in the movie. And what we thought was going to be about that person ended up being a completely different direction that they took the movie in. It had a shock value, but at the end of it, it led to one of these what if questions. And I asked Malika, what if something were to happen to you? What would you want for me to do? And Malika, she thought about it for a minute and she told me, Ty, if something were to happen to me, I wouldn't want you to grieve forever. I wouldn't want you to suffer for too long. And I want you to go back out there and find happiness again. And then Malika thought about it for a second and she came up with this list. And on this list were the names of 7 women that she said, under no circumstances whatsoever, better be around our home, be around our son, better not be bringing me casseroles. She said, nuh-uh, none of that. That if any of these women were going to be around me, that she was going to come back and haunt me. And so after that, she thought about it again and she said, but the most important thing that I want you to do is make sure that the only part of me that's still left on this earth is well taken care of. And that's our son, Cameron. And so, as I was in those moments where I didn't want to get up, where I didn't want to go to counseling, where I didn't want to get the help that I needed to recover, I had to think about that promise that I made to my wife in order to make sure that our son was okay. And so, over the years, I've done everything I could to be the dad that I could, to be able to make sure that I'm taking care of him in a way that would make her proud to a point where that one time 12-year-old boy is now 20 years old and is a strong, emotionally mature young man who is doing his thing out there in the world today. When I didn't want to keep going, I had to find that source of motivation for me. I ask you this, what is the source of your motivation when you don't want to get up and keep going? Maybe it is taking the steps to get the help that you need in order to survive. Maybe it is the person who is who you care about most in your life. Maybe it is your children. Maybe it is that desire to not stay stuck. Whatever it is, find that source of your motivation. Write it down and make sure you reflect on it every day because there are going to be those days where you're not going to want to fight. But that motivation is going to keep you going when you least expect it. As I get ready to wind up here, 2 more points I want to talk about. What is your attitude? Your attitude, your thoughts, your beliefs, the way that you look at yourself, the way that you feel about the situations that you're in. There are 2 things in life that you have full control over. That is your attitude, that is your effort. You can't let other people bring you down if you can find a way to feel that self-confidence, to feel as you believe in yourself, as you think and you believe that you can overcome what's in front of you. This is a picture of me, and as broken and as hurt as I was, I had a smile on my face. That is trying to find the silver lining in even the worst situations. The greater positive outlook that we have on the situations and circumstances we are, the more likely we are to be in problem solving mode, to be able to process and think through what are we going to do in order to get past it. When we don't have a positive attitude, we let our circumstances define us. We find ourselves remaining stuck in ways without looking for solutions to get out of it. Having the right attitude actually helped me to move forward in life. As I started thinking about where I was going, I was starting to make progress physically. After I started walking, I kept trying to do the working out and trying to do the physical therapy. I started doing a boot camp 4 days a week just to start to regain some of the strength back in my body. Before I knew it, my walk turned into a jog, and my jog turned into a slight run. And before I knew it, I was riding a stationary bike. Before I knew it, I found myself able to jump over boxes with this prosthetic leg. Before I knew it, the next thing that I realized that I did as I was having this gratitude, I was starting to feel more confident and better about myself and what I was able to do. I started using social media, showing these pictures and images, and before I knew it, I had some of my friends coming to me saying, well, look, we see what you're doing out there. When are you going to come out and start running 5Ks and 10Ks and doing these things? I found myself as someone who was uh, using my adversity to push me to do things that I never did. I went and started learning how to swim with one leg. which isn't an easy thing to do, but it was something I was able to do. But as I was getting pushed and encouraged, as I said, my confidence was increasing. I was feeling as though I could do more and more things that might seem impossible to others. And having that positive attitude led to me actually 6 months after the incident, I found myself running my first 5K. 8 months after the incident, I ran my first 10K. And I was not a runner, but when you have the right attitude and you frame things in this type of way, you start to realize that you have the determination, the focus, the will, and the commitment to yourself that everything is possible. And those obstacles are only steps along your journey to success. That's how you get from surviving to thriving. Finding that right attitude is going to be critical and important in you moving forward. So I'm going to ask you this. What are the thoughts, what are the feelings, what are the beliefs that are controlling you and your attitude and prevent you from moving past whatever's in your way? Now, as I go through the rest of this, I'm just gonna just a little bit here. If you want to get in contact with me, this is a little bit of information about how to be able to reach me. You can find me on social media, Tiran Jackson, Tiran Jackson Official. Reach out to me if this is inspiring you or impacting you in any way. But as I get ready to wind up here, I want to talk about the last step. The last step is the process. What is the process? A process is a specific set of actions to get you from where you are to where you want to be in life. Every step that everywhere you got in life, your mind got there first. But you have to be able to visualize where that end destination is in order to create a sound strategy in order to get there. As we go through our challenges from a mental health standpoint, we know that we have to take these steps in order to heal. Now, do we want to do it? We don't always want to follow the process, but I see a process as a proven and 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 clear method to be able to just get one step closer towards that end goal. Sometimes we don't realize that it takes intention in order to create the strategy for our process. Now, I didn't know it at the time. As I was going through my recovery, physically, I was getting back to a place where I was getting stronger. Emotionally, I was getting back to a place where I started to completely, or at least I started to process the grief and was learning that I was going to have to live life without Malika, but that there was a life worth living moving forward. And as like I said before, much earlier in this talk, it was clear that I was going to have to go down a different path than what I was used to as an engineer. I didn't know that it was going to come in the form of being asked to be able to share my story. And about 9 months after the incident, a friend of mine who happened to work for a life insurance company said that they were having a conference and they wanted me to come and just share what I had to go through and my thoughts and my experience as a young widower losing my wife. And I thought to myself, I've never been on the stage before. This is not what I do. But understanding that let me get up here and do this. So I created me some content, thought I had a speech written out. I got up on the stage and 3 minutes into it, I found myself in tears and I forgot everything that I was going to say and I just spoke from the heart. What I found was that even though that's the worst talk I'd given, um, that it was able to connect with people, that people could see the journey of coming through the pain. And I thought that was going to be the only time that I would do it. I found myself 2 months later being asked by the same life insurance company if I would come and speak at another conference. And I gave a message there. It was even better, but it still wasn't good. But I thought, okay, I've done it again, and that was it. 2 months later, they asked me to come again and speak at another conference, but that they were going to pay me in order to do that. And so this started to trigger, well, maybe I need to look at what does it take to get good at doing this. And so that led to me saying, okay, let me find somebody who is experienced, the right coach, a good speaker who can help me understand how to do this in a more powerful, uh, in an improved way. And that process led me to finding ways of getting better and doing it. And before I knew it, the process led to that journal that I started writing in when I was in the bed in my sister's house and couldn't do anything but write with my right hand. being turned into something greater, which became my first book called Choosing Resilience. And then that process has been able to lead to me being able to find other ways of being able to impact and touch others by not just using this story, but showing people that no, despite the obstacles and the adversity that you face, that the way that you react is going to determine where you end up. And so I say all these things for this purpose. You have to have that vision. You have to visualize where you want to be, where you want to go, and what you need to do in order to take that next first step, that next best step in your life. Do you have a clear vision of what that strategy or what that process looks like for you? If you don't, then I advise that you start to work with somebody to get clarity on what your future looks like if you want to get there. And so that process is so important because it makes it easier for us to go down the path. Now, it doesn't mean the path is going to be easy, but at least when you have structure, you have a greater chance for success when you face adversity in your life. So, as I get ready to wind this up, I want to share with you guys that even though I have faced unexpected, tremendous trauma and adversity, I am not the same person I was when that adversity happened to me. In the midst of going through what it took for me to even recover and start to get my life back together, it taught me lessons on what it truly meant to embody resilience. If you remember nothing else, remember what I said earlier, that resilience is not about regaining what was lost, but it's going to be about reshaping what still remains. We all have the present. We all have our current situation and circumstances. What are you going to do to rebuild your life with where you are today? I hope you take control of your life and start taking the actions in order to restore yourself and to start to be able to get to that place of acceptance of your reality and start visualizing what steps you need to take in the future to move forward with the process. As I close out, just want to say this once again. My name is Tiran Jackson. I'm a man who's been transformed from being broken and literally burning in the flames to someone who is striving to be able to change lives every day of my life. I hope that what you've heard this evening has inspired you, motivated you, but shown you that you are not alone. That there are so many people who are going through some level of pain, some level of adversity, facing the depression, facing the obstacles that keep them from being able to think clearly and operating well in this world. But don't use that as an excuse. Use it as the catalyst to create the future of your dreams. As I said, my name is Tiran Jackson. Make the conscious decision to choose to be resilient, and that can change your life, and you can reach that next step in order to move forward. And with that, I will stop. I know I've talked for a long time. Carolyn, I don't know if you want to come back on, but I hope that this story has really shown others, shown you all out there that there is a path, and by choosing resilience, you can make the most and do great things with your life.
Thank you so much, Tiran.
Tyran,
Tyran, thank
Tyran.
you. My apologies. Thank you so much for your inspiring story. Thank you for joining us today. The recording will be up later this week. And thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next month.
If anybody has any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on social media or visit rebornresilient.com. I love to connect and get your thoughts. And if anybody that you know is going through some pain or wanting to get some additional support and how to figure out what that next best step is, feel free to connect with me. And I thank you all again for letting me be a part of your Thursday session.
Oh, thank you. You gave me chills. Chills. Absolutely.
All
Absolutely.
right.
Thank you so much from GBSA California. You are absolutely, you're such a rock star in every possible way. And it was so gratifying to meet you and hear your story and you're glowing. You're absolutely glowing. And we love you so much. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Wendy. Thank you,
Thank
guys. I
you.
greatly appreciate you all. Thank you for having me. I wish everybody a great night as well.
An honor.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Guys, take care.
Good night.
Goodbye.
Good night.